Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're tackling Computer Programming 101. Are you ready to sort of demystify this whole world of computer programming?
Absolutely. I think it's a topic that a lot of people find intimidating, but it's really fascinating once you dig in.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by some of the things I learned while prepping for this.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, for starters, did you know there are like over 140 programming languages out there?
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
And they each have their own unique history and purpose.
It's mind-blowing. And get this, one language, COBOL was like practically mandated by the US government back in the day.
Yes, COBOL. It's a dinosaur in the tech world, but it's still running a lot of critical systems today.
No kidding, it's still used. That's crazy.
Okay, so maybe someone is listening to this right now and thinking like, programming.
Yeah.
Not for me. I'm not a tech person.
I hear that a lot. And you know what?
Yep.
That's totally understandable. But the thing is, even a basic understanding of programming can be so empowering.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like even if you're not planning to become a programmer? Exactly. It's like learning any new language. It opens up a whole new way of thinking.
That's a great analogy. You start to see the logic behind all the tech we use every single day.
Right. And you can become a more confident user overall.
Okay, so let's say I do want to learn how to program. What does a programmer actually do all day? Is it just sitting in a dark room typing code?
Well, there's definitely some coding involved,
Hmm.
but it's so much more than that. It's like building a house. You don't just start hammering away, right?
If you need a blueprint first.
Exactly. You need a plan. And programming is all about breaking down a problem into steps that a computer can understand.
Okay, that makes sense. But real-world problems can be so complex. How do programmers even begin to translate that into something a computer can work with?
That's where things get interesting. They use tools like flowcharts and pseudocode to map out the logic of the solution before they even write any code.
A flowchart, is that like a visual map of the process?
Exactly. It uses different symbols to represent different actions or decisions in the program.
Oh, so it's like a recipe, but for a computer.
Exactly. And then pseudocode is similar, but instead of symbols, it uses plain English to describe the steps.
So it's like sketching out your ideas before you commit to the actual code.
Precisely. It's a way to make sure the logic is sound before diving into the nitty-gritty of a specific programming language.
That's so clever. Okay, so that's the planning stage, but I'm still curious about the actual coding part. Is that when all those different programming languages come into play?
Yes. Once you've planned out your solution, you need to translate those ideas into a language the computer can understand. And that's where those 140 programming languages come in.
Wow, over 140. That's a lot to choose from.
Right.
How do programmers even decide which one to use?
It's a bit like a chef choosing the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use a whisk to chop vegetables, right?
Right. Different tools for different tasks.
Exactly. Different programming languages are better suited for different types of tasks. Some are great for building websites, others for analyzing data, and others for making mobile apps.
So it's all about finding the right tool for the job. Got it. But even if I'm not trying to become a master chef or I guess a master coder, this is starting to make a lot more sense.
And just like a chef needs to taste their dish, a programmer needs to test their code to make sure it's working properly. That's where debugging comes in.
Debugging. That sounds kind of scary.
It can be a bit like detective work. You're looking for errors in your code and trying to figure out how to fix them.
So it's not all glamorous coding wizardry. There's some serious problem solving involved too.
Absolutely. And that's what makes programming so rewarding. It's a constant process of learning problem solving and creating something new.
Okay, so we've got the planning, the coding, the testing.
Yeah.
Is that everything?
Almost. There's one more crucial step, documentation.
Documentation. Isn't that just a bunch of boring paperwork?
It might seem that way,
Yeah.
but trust me, it's super important. It's like leaving a detailed owner's manual for your program. It explains how it works, how to use it, how to troubleshoot any problems.
So basically it helps anyone who might need to use your code in the future.
Right? Including yourself 6 months down the line when you've completely forgotten how it all works.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. It's easy to forget that coding is often a team effort too, so good documentation can save everyone a lot of headaches.
Absolutely. All right, so we've covered the basics, planning, coding, testing, and documenting. But now I'm really curious about those 140 plus programming languages. Where do we even begin with all of those?
Right. Are some more important to learn than others?
That's a great question, and it's a perfect place to pick up next time. We'll explore some of the most popular and influential languages out there and why they matter to you, even if you're not planning to become a programmer yourself.
Sounds good to me. I'm all for practical knowledge. Can't wait to dive into the world of programming languages.
Me too. It's going to be a fascinating journey through the history of technology.
Okay, so we talked about all those programming languages, over 140 of them. That's a lot. Where do we even start?
Well, we could go through all 140, but
Yeah.
I think we both might fall asleep before we even get halfway.
Yeah, that sounds a bit much. Maybe we could focus on a few key ones. The ones that are like actually relevant to our listeners. You know?
Absolutely. Even if you're not planning to become a programmer yourself, understanding some of these languages can be incredibly insightful. Let's start with Python, for example.
Python. I've heard of that one. It's pretty popular, right?
It is. It's known for being very versatile. It's used in web development, data science, even artificial intelligence.
Really? Wow. So like a lot of the websites and apps we use every day probably rely on Python.
It's very likely. And it's a good language to start with because it's considered one of the easier ones to learn.
Oh, that's good to know. So what else is out there besides Python? I mean,
But let's talk about Java.
yeah.
It's been around for a long time, and it's known for its reliability and portability.
Portability, what does that mean?
It means that Java code can run on pretty much any platform, which is why it's so widely used in things like enterprise applications,
Yeah.
Android mobile apps, even embedded systems like smart appliances.
Embedded systems. So
Yeah.
like the software that runs our refrigerators and stuff.
Exactly. Java is everywhere.
Wow. Okay. So we've got Python for like web stuff and Java for pretty much everything else. What else should we talk about?
Let's round things out with JavaScript. Now, this one often gets confused with Java, but they're actually very different.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. What's the difference between Java and JavaScript?
Well, simply put, JavaScript is primarily used for front-end web development. It's what makes websites interactive and dynamic.
Oh, so all those cool animations and like pop-ups and interactive maps and stuff, that's all JavaScript.
Exactly. It brings websites to life.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. JavaScript is also becoming increasingly popular for back-end development, too.
Great. So you can use JavaScript for both the front end and the back end of a website?
That's right, thanks to tools like Node.js. And that can make things a lot simpler for developers.
Wow. The more I learn about this, the more I realize how much, I don't know, it seems like the world of programming is constantly evolving.
It absolutely is, and that's what makes it so exciting. There are always new languages, new technologies emerging. But, learning about programming languages is just one part of this Computer Programming 101.
Yeah.
Also dives into some really interesting career advice.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners are probably wondering how all of this translates into actual jobs. What does the source have to say about that?
Well, it's pretty honest about the job market. It says that the overall growth for programmers might be slower than average due to automation and outsourcing.
Oh, that doesn't sound too promising.
But here's the key. It emphasizes that there's still a strong demand for programmers with specialized skills.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing how to code in general, but about specializing in a certain area.
Exactly. The source specifically mentions object-oriented programming, web development, cybersecurity, mobile app development as having particularly strong job prospects.
So if you want to get a job in programming, you need to pick your specialty and really hone in on that.
Right. And the source offers some great advice on how to develop those specialized skills. It talks about getting practical experience through internships, personal projects, contributing to open source projects.
Open source projects? What are those?
Basically, they're collaborative software projects that are publicly available so anyone can contribute to them.
So it's like a way to get real-world experience even if you don't have a formal programming job.
Exactly. It's a great way to learn from other programmers, get feedback on your work, build up your portfolio.
It sounds like networking is super important too, right? Like in any field.
Or absolutely. Attending industry events, joining online forums, connecting with people on platforms like LinkedIn, that's all crucial. And the source also talks about building a strong portfolio.
So like showcasing your skills and experience.
Right. And here's another important tip from the source. Don't be afraid to negotiate your salary or benefits. Knowing your worth and advocating for yourself is crucial.
That's so important. But it's easy to feel intimidated in this field, right? Like imposter syndrome is a real thing.
Definitely. And the source acknowledges that. It talks about embracing a growth mindset, seeing challenges as opportunities for learning and development.
Yeah.
And it stresses the importance of continuous learning.
So like always staying up to date with the latest technologies.
Exactly. Because this field is constantly evolving. But, Computer Programming 101 goes beyond just the technical stuff. It also touches on something that really resonated with me, this idea that programming is becoming an international language.
Right. We talked about that earlier. I'm really curious to explore that further.
Yeah.
What does it mean for the future of work and global communication?
It's a really fascinating concept, right? It suggests that programming skills could become as essential as reading and writing.
Because people from different cultures and backgrounds can collaborate through code.
Exactly. It's a universal language that transcends borders. And that's what we'll be diving into in the final part of this deep dive.
Can't wait. This is getting really interesting. All right. So we've talked about what programming is and the languages and careers, and now this whole idea of programming becoming like an international language.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful concept, right?
It is. But I guess I'm wondering, like, are we really headed in that direction? Are programming skills really going to be that essential in the future?
Well, I think we're already seeing how software and tech are kind of permeating every aspect of our lives.
True. Like everything from how we communicate to how we work, even healthcare.
Exactly. And as this trend continues, having even a basic understanding of how software works will become more and more valuable.
Okay, so maybe not everyone needs to be a professional programmer,
Yeah.
but like being digitally literate is going to be important for everyone.
Right. Think of it like driving a car. You
Hmm.
don't need to be a mechanic to drive, but understanding the basics can make you a more informed and confident driver.
I like that analogy. Okay, so back to this international language thing. What would a world where programming is a universal language actually look like? I mean, really?
Well, for one, we might see a shift towards more remote and global workforces.
So companies could hire people from anywhere in the world.
Exactly. And people could have more flexibility in terms of where they live and work.
That's pretty cool. But what about communication beyond work? Could programming really become a way for people from different cultures to like connect on a deeper level?
I think it has that potential.
Yeah.
Imagine scientists from different countries collaborating on research through code.
Or artists creating a digital art installation together using code as their common language.
Right. The possibilities are pretty exciting. But it also raises some important questions about accessibility and equity.
Yeah, how do we make sure everyone has the opportunity to learn these skills, regardless of their background or location?
That's a really crucial point.
Yeah.
We need to create more equitable access to programming education and resources.
So things like affordable internet access, developing culturally relevant curriculum, creating supportive learning environments.
Exactly. We need to make sure everyone could be a part of this technological revolution. Even if someone isn't interested in becoming a programmer, there are still so many benefits to learning even a little bit of code.
Like what? What are some of those benefits?
Well, it can definitely boost your problem-solving skills and critical thinking.
Because you have to break down problems into smaller steps and logically come up with creative solutions.
Right. And those skills are valuable in any field, not just tech, even in your everyday life.
Totally, like figuring out a better way to organize your to-do list or troubleshooting a problem with your Wi-Fi.
Exactly. But I think one of the most powerful things about learning to code is that it can foster a sense of creativity and empowerment. It's about moving from being just a consumer of technology to becoming a creator.
That's a great way to put it, from consumer to creator.
It's about realizing that you have the power to build things to solve problems, to make a difference in the world using technology.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Computer Programming 101, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
I hope they'll leave with a sense of curiosity and excitement about the possibilities of programming.
Even if they don't become professional programmers.
Right. Whether they use it to enhance their current work or just to better understand the tech that shapes their world.
Yeah,
I think learning to code can be an incredibly empowering and rewarding experience.
I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of computer programming. We hope you learned something new and maybe even discovered a passion for code. Until next time, happy programming, everyone.
You can download the book for free from our website.